Hello lovelies and welcome to this video. Now in this video I'm going to just walk you through, hopefully not to take too long, how to create this beautiful card here. I've seen it a few times on various social media posts, and then I actually saw, and I do apologise, I don't remember the name of the consultant's name, but I saw one of our consultants used the Close to My Heart May stamp of the month, which is this one here. So I thought I'd give it a go and then share how I created this card. The ones that I'd seen have been using a printed background, but you can use a stamp as well. So here we go. I've done most of the work before I started the video, but what I've got is I've got a card base, and I've also taken another card base and just cut it in half. The reason for that is because the Close to My Heart card bases tend to be a little bit thinner than our white cardstock, and I wanted something that it was a bit thinner than our cardstock so that I could do this tearing and rolling. Okay, so I've done that. I've then stamped my sentiment down in this bottom right hand corner, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just tear along about half, 3/4 of an inch from the top and about 1.5 inches from the bottom. Now the first tear I'm going to do is actually this bottom one, so I'm just going to be a little bit OCD and measure roughly 1.5 inches, and I'm going to tear the top away, which will expose this ripped layer. So I'm going to tear like this. I'm actually going to tear it towards me because I find that easier, and I know pretty well that I want to tear it across to roughly the start of this. Now, how to figure out how far you're tearing it is whatever length your stamped image is, and also whatever your sentiment, the length of your sentiment. So you want to be able to see your sentiment, but you also don't want to uncover your stamped image. All right, so just going to tear that, as I said, across to just before that, because when we then roll it, sometimes it can cover up that sentiment. So I can go about that far. So that has now exposed, as you can see, the ripped edge of that side, where it's given the solid side of that one. When I did this card, I noticed that I did the ripped there, and then it was solid there, if that makes sense. So I'm going to do it a little bit differently on this one, and what I want to do is get the ripped side up here. So what that will require is I'm actually going to need to tear this towards me. So this bit towards me, but as I mentioned before, I wanted it about 1/2 inch or so. So I'm going to tear like this, and that will expose this ripped, whereas that will be solid. So I'm going to do reasonably straight, and if you're like me and you don't really like tearing, then you can just go nice and slowly. And I'm just checking because I want it to come up to line up roughly with that. All right, so that's about right. Probably go a little bit further. Now I don't even know if I'm doing this right because I didn't watch any tutorials or anything. I just kind of went, yep, I'm going to have a go at this. And I did. Then I'm just going to crease this paper like so. I'm then going to start to roll this, and depending on if you're going to be posting this in the mail or giving it to someone in person, you might choose to do what I'm about to do, or you can just leave it as a whole piece. But what I did with this piece is I actually rolled it up like so. So I rolled it, and then I let it go, unrolled it, and I actually cut about half of this off so that it wasn't quite as solid and thick. So I'm just cutting that off. I know this has got a nice curl to it, so then I will roll again like so, and it's just not quite as thick. So now I've got that, I can get my adhesive, and I'm just using the Tombow Mono Air permanent adhesive. I'm going to put adhesive down just inside the top tear lines, so right there. So it's before the tear lines, And then again, I'm going to roll this up, and that will hold nice and firm on that spot right there. So there I have my top layer. The next thing I'm going to do is, so this is simply a piece of just normal white cardstock, and I've stamped a partial image. So the whole image would cover the whole of this, but because I wanted the sun showing through on the left-hand side of the page, I've only stamped half. Now I've got mountains that I've fussy cut already, just to keep it quick, and I've also got the sun that I've fussy cut. So all I've done with them is I've stamped them onto craft paper, as well as some lemonade paper, and then I've cut around them. I'm going to build them onto this page, but first what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my watercolor paints. Let me see if I can try and do this so you can see it in the camera. Watercolor paints, watercolor pen, and I'm just going to put some watercolor over the mountains and under the mountains as well. So I used a little bit of this light blue. The more water you have, the lighter the color is, and the more paint you've got, so the less water, the darker the color, or the more intense the color, I probably should say. So I'm just picking that up with my brush. Doesn't matter if I do go over the edge of the mountains, because I've got a fussy cut piece that is going to go over that as well. So that's all going to be covered. And I just came up to the top of the sun with that one. Now, if you look at a normal sky, it starts light and then it goes darker the higher it goes up. So I'm then taking a little bit of this second darker color, mixing it into the lighter color just so that they do blend. And then I'm going to come down from the top like so. Now this one is a little bit more watery than my first, and that's okay. I quite like that effect. So that's my first watercolor. Then all I need to do is get, I can use paper towel, which I don't have handy, so I actually just used my stamp chamois. Squeeze that out and clean that off. The next thing I did was I wanted a color on these mountains that was a little bit grey, a little bit brown. So I actually grabbed this brown here. Grabbed a little bit of this brown. In fact, I think I had some left in one of my little, so this is the lid of my watercolor paints. And I'll grab a little bit of this one and just mix it to a brown that I like. Now I want to make sure that is nice and wet. I don't want that to be too thick, too dark. So make sure that's nice and wet. And then I'm just going to colour in these mountains down here. Yep, that's beautiful. So just like that. And then I want some water down the bottom. To me, water is not always blue. In fact, most lakes are more green than blue. So I'm going to take the blue that I've used and I'm going to add in a little bit of dark green. Just squeeze some water out. Doesn't matter if it's got a little bit of the brown in it. I'm not that worried. So take a little bit of green, add in the green to the blue. And by adding all of those colours and mixing them up together, what I'm doing is I'm keeping it in the same sort of tones as each other. And again, I'm not that worried if it's a darker or a lighter. This will end up being covered by the bottom of the card. But that's pretty well it. Watercolor paints are fantastic, just a really quick and easy way to colour, as long as you're not too much of a perfectionist, which I was when I started. Keep in mind, I was when I started. I am better now. And that's the effect that you get. Now, the only caveat to this is that this has now made the paper wet, which means it does make it a little bit harder to stick things down. But I'm going to stick them down anyway. So starting with the sun, you'll notice that I didn't cut the bottom off the sun, and that's going to help me to line up the sun on the mountains where it's meant to go. So I'm just sticking everything down flat. You could always use some 3D foam tape if you wanted to, although with the sun I probably wouldn't. If you're going to use 3D foam tape on anything I would be doing it on the mountain. So just stick that down flat, and you can see that's helped me line it up so that it's exactly where it should be. And the next is the mountain. Now, again, a tip with these images that are fussy cut. When you're fussy cutting something this is called paper piecing, when you're fussy cutting something that's going to be paper pieced, really important not to leave a white gap around the outside, or you'll see that over the top of the image that you've stamped. So what you can do is you can either make sure that you cut in the middle of the black line, or you can take an alcohol marker or a Sharpie, a black one if you've stamped in black, and just go along the outside with that Sharpie marker. Now, I've made sure that I did actually cut in the middle of that on this one. This card I didn't, and I've just gone around the outside to make sure that there's no brown left showing. I did that with the sun as well. All right, I'm going to put a little bit of adhesive on this one. And again, this is pretty well dry, so I can stick this down. So there we go with that one. I'm just going to line it up with the image that's underneath. And there we have the bottom, the base layer of my picture. So then I need to grab this one. And you can imagine once this is dry, there's no point me sticking it down now because that is still wet, and so the adhesive won't actually stick. But I'll stick this onto here, and if I want to, I could bring it up or down, but that looks pretty good. You'll notice that this bottom piece is actually slightly narrower than the card. This is a card base, so this will fit directly on top of that, and that will be the right size. This is slightly smaller, and that just gives me a little bit of room to move. Now, I do want it flush with the left-hand side, but I can move this up and down to suit. So I could have the sun almost touching the top, or I could take that down a little bit and have less of the ocean and more of the sun. So I could do that. But I can muck around with that as I please. So I can stick this one down. It's not too wet on the back. Let me just do that and I'll show you. Making sure that I do have it up the right way. So if I do that, and then this will go directly over the top once it's dry, and that will finish my card off. Now on this one I did decide to put a little penguin because he was cute, and I've also used some liquid pearls, so just 3 dots of liquid pearls, which I may end up doing on that one as well to decorate it. So there you go. No, there's one final thing I just realised on this stamp set as well, just to give it a little bit more depth. There is a bird, and all I did was once I'd done all the painting and stuck everything down, I took my black ink, and having a look at this one, I decided I didn't like the darker, I don't know if you can see that, the darker there and the lighter there. So this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the darker one higher and the lighter one lower. And that means that the darker one looks like it's in the foreground and the lighter one looks like it's in the background. And I like that card as well. So there you go. That is my, I don't even know what this card technique is called, but I hope you've enjoyed that. If there's anything that you want to ask me, any questions, feel free to send me a message. Otherwise, stay safe, keep crafting, and bye for now.